Ladies, on March 27th at the Golden Gate Club in San Francisco, I invite you to join a room of trailblazers, executives, entrepreneurs, and visionaries who are rewriting the rules of money. Hear from real women who've built wealth through real estate investments, scaling businesses, and creative financial strategies. And learn from industry leaders who have walked the path you're on and who are ready to share their playbooks. You'll engage in intimate panels, fireside conversations, and curated peer-to-peer matchmaking designed to spark meaningful connections. Leave with our wealth creation toolkit packed with actionable resources to help you prioritize your goals and take immediate steps towards financial independence. Now, your journey doesn't end when the day is over. Each of you will be invited to join our online Catalyst community, where you'll be guided through more educational opportunities and times to be able to connect with each other over the course of the next few months. Wealth creation is about opportunity and community. Now, early bird tickets are $9.99 through February 27th. Don't wait. This is your moment to build confidence, community, and wealth. Apply now at women.win and use the code SHAMA25, that's SYAMA25, to get a 25% discount off the early bird price. The Women in Wealth Catalyst Summit, ladies. It's time to redefine wealth and redefine your future.
Welcome to Getting Rich Together, the show for successful women who are looking to take their financial futures to the next level. I'm your host, Shama Bunton. When I started my wealth building journey, nobody knocked on my door to give me all the answers. So I want to talk to the experts who've done it and bring the answers to you so we can discover the right opportunities that will help us achieve the financial futures we've always dreamed of together and have fun doing it. So let's dive into this episode and start getting rich together. I am here today with the delicious Elaine Asher. Elaine, you are known for educating and inspiring women to get rich together through investing, and more specifically in expanding their horizons on how they think of alternative asset investing. I love your passion, your spirit, your brilliance. I am grateful to call you a friend. Thank you so much for being here today on Getting Rich Together. Welcome to the show.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. It is such a treat and such an honor. I've been such a fan of yours ever since I met you. Love listening to your podcast. I'm honored to be included amongst the other phenomenal women you've had on. So yeah, I'm thrilled to be here.
Well, my love, let's start from the beginning. Let's go back to a delightful, young, 6, 7, 10-year-old Elaine who's growing up in this beautiful world. Talk to me a little bit about your family. Talk to me a little bit about money. What was life like growing up?
Yes, I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas. Was super fortunate to grow up in a very financially secure, successful household. Dad worked, mom stayed at home. That's definitely part of the formative of my early years. And it was funny. I think, I was thinking back on it in preparation for this. And despite my father being professionally successful and financially successful, he, to this day, remains cheap as shit. It drives me crazy. But it was very much like he wanted to impart on us the value of money. And I'm sure a lot of other people can identify with this, grew up with phrases like money doesn't grow on trees. And I'm sure it was probably a product of him growing up with parents who were from the Great Depression. But I remember, especially as a kid, so my father worked for Tandy Corp, which owned Radio Shacks, which is why we lived in Fort Worth, where it was headquartered. And all I wanted as a kid was the yellow Sony Walkman. Remember that? It was an icon. Everybody had one. Everybody wanted one. It's all I wanted. Nope. I had to have some black generic piece of junk from Radio Shack. But I remember him explaining to me, it's exactly the same. The parts are the same. It works the same. It is exactly the same. But no, I wanted the brand yellow. But so that was kind of a funny early childhood memory around money.
I love that.
Another one I really remember is I was probably 11 or 12. And this is kind of the first memory I have of investing being something. Was right around my birthday in October of 1987 was a massive stock market crash. think it was called Black Monday, and the Dow dropped over 20%. And back in the 80s, that was huge. And I think I was having a birthday party that night or around then. And let's just say it was a really bad day in the Asher family household. I just remember my father coming home from work, and he was in a bad mood, and we were going to leave him alone. It was a somber weekend, just simply because the stock market had crashed. And so that was one of my first memories that, okay, investing is a thing that can impact your mood because you're worried, for better or worse.
That's so interesting because it's a very formative memory, to feel volatility around your world, or seeing, the adults in your life so affected. Yes. It makes you feel like, oh, this is something I need to worry about, or this is something that is possible. And, I was just reading the other day about how children's minds are still in this like really juicy, formative stage up until about the age 10 or 12, right? Yeah. And it's like, when you're young and these things are happening, you can't often separate yourself from what is happening, right? So it's like, did you do something wrong?
Right.
Did your mom do something? Who did something wrong, or what?
Going on? Why is everybody so upset? Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's so interesting to think about, like, wow, like this thing happened that's so external to your world, and yet it had such an internal impact in terms of like how we embody things. Wow, what a birthday, Elaine. Okay, so
I think we still have the party. I think the party still went ahead.
Oh, I love that. So moving on through high school, did you find yourself to be really focused on studies, part-time job? Did you have this clear vision you were going to go be prolific in finance? Like, what was like, where were you at?
No, I had, despite working in finance now and for the past 10 years or so, that was never part of my career trajectory. My parents had really instilled in both my brother and I the importance of education and getting a liberal arts education and following your passions and studying what you wanted to study. I had a slightly interesting high school years and absolutely shaped me to who I am today. I had the pleasure of attending 3 different high schools in 4 years. We moved around quite a bit when I was a teenager. We left Texas and moved to Canada for a year, then moved to Brussels, Belgium for 2 years. I went back to boarding school in the States for my final 2 years. So that was move, make new friends fast. But it was an amazing opportunity, especially to live abroad at that age was spectacular. And I had really interesting, not applicable to future career summer jobs, simply to make money so that then I could, save up to buy a car or do the things that I wanted to do. So I had fun summer jobs doing things like waitressing. I had one internship in DC one summer, which was really fun, working for a nonprofit lobbying group associated with the Historic Preservation Society. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was younger. I just was always super studious, total type A, straight A, studied all the time. Always loved writing, was a great writer. And so, part of the moving around so much as a teenager. And also those were very, very cold locations we moved to after having lived in Texas my entire life. 4 winters. I vowed I would never see snow again unless it was by choice. And so that is how I ended up in North Carolina at Duke for college, because I wanted to go somewhere where it didn't snow. And then that is how I ended up in the Bay Area in San Francisco, because all of my friends at Duke were from here. And again, a testament to probably the upheaval of moving around so much. I've been here for over 25 years.
Yay! Oh, I just love that. And so as you were going through university, what was that experience like? Now, certainly for most people, university is like a first point of exposure to the world. But by that time, you had a lot of exposure to the world. And that sort of causes you to be independent, on your feet. You're kind of approaching university more from a true young adult's mind, right? Rather than sort of, let's say, a traditional high schooler entering into university. How did that really change or shape your experience, what you studied? How does that focus or, let's say, maturity impact you?
It was interesting is there's such pressure put on you to get into the best college you can, and college is going to be this amazing experience. And I absolutely loved every minute of my time at Duke. I always say I got my education at boarding school. I went to Deerfield, and it was the most academically rigorous, hardest thing I had ever done in my entire life. I had always gone to decent schools, but one of the reasons I went back to boarding school is because just the high school in Brussels was not very challenging, and my family didn't think I would have as good a shot at getting into college if I didn't go to a better high school. So I left what was a super easy, standard, generic style, John Hughes type high school, but stuck in Brussels, to one of the hardest academically challenging programs that I'd ever experienced. So by the time I got to Duke, it was pretty easy. And I was able to focus on things that I really enjoyed studying. And it's funny, the things I studied have nothing to do with anything I've done professionally. Well, that's not true. I studied history and art history, double major, with a certificate in Renaissance medieval studies.
Fancy.
The stuff that I liked. Like, I gravitated towards subjects I liked and towards professors I liked. Did a ton of ancient Roman history, ancient Roman art. So yeah, it had nothing to do with finance. But I think, again, it's a testament to my parents that there was no pressure to study something that would lead to a career, for better or worse. It was follow your passions, study what you're interested in. And as college was ending, I really had no idea what I wanted to do. And I think because of that, I thought, okay, well, I like school. I'll just keep going to school. So I took the LSAT and considered applying to law school. And I woke up one day and I thought, I don't actually want to be a lawyer. I just am delaying getting a real job. So maybe let's take a step back and think about that. And so I decided not to go to law school, and instead decided to move to San Francisco and join the job market. Again, having no idea what I wanted to do. And ended up my very first job was working for an investor relations agency. And my first job was essentially cold calling Wall Street.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah. So my job was, we had a roster of clients, and we would call up buy-side analysts and sell-side analysts to try to initiate coverage of clients, or try to get clients to buy try to get investors to buy our client stock. And this was in 1998-ish. And so the internet was just getting going, the .com 1.0. And that's all anybody wanted to talk about from an investing standpoint. And my clients were these super sexy real estate investment trusts. So I learned more than I ever wanted to know about REITs, and specifically about hotel REITs. So I can talk to you about revenue per available room all day long.
How?
But part of that, yeah, I learned how to read a balance sheet. I covered all of their earnings calls. I wrote, analysis on the earnings calls, and tried to, convince investors to invest in these client stocks based on, what we were publishing. It was fascinating.
I mean, you were essentially learning you were becoming an expert salesman. I mean, it's really like learning the psychology of sales, understanding positioning, with the sort of financial backing and data points to really prove a case. And, that's really, it's such a fascinating and interesting way to shape your young mind, through the lens of selling in financial, these products that I think are unique and rare for someone of your age, right?
No, it was definitely my first exposure to, I think of it as, and the through line of my entire career is consultative sales, where your job is to figure out what the person on the other end of the phone, or these days the Zoom, what they want, need, and are looking for, and how what you have to offer might fit what it is they're looking for.
Mm-hmm. And so by the time you had hit this point, had you had any conversations with your father around finance or investing? Was 1987 sort of the first and last moment you heard of it, or had you been guided at all to sort of be thinking about these things as you were entering in the workforce?
So it's interesting, with the exception of max out your 401k and only work for somebody who offers a 401k with matching. Not really. But around this time was when I got my first exposure to, obviously through the job, through investing, But then I did not love this first job, let's just say. And around the same time, my grandfather, my mother's father, had passed away, lived a big, great, long life. And unbeknownst to any of us, he was a secret millionaire and had tons of money. We were all shocked because the man lived like a pauper. I mean, you talk about buying generic. There wasn't a brand name in his household, and he was composting and growing his own vegetables for, long before it was fashionable to do so. But he had been a biochemist at Philip Morris for the majority of his career. And, before they only made cigarettes, they did other interesting things. And he had some patents on some of those things and had, Philip Morris stock purchased for pennies. And so when he passed away, we all discovered that he had been gifting the maximum tax-free amount to all of us grandkids and secretly investing it. So all of a sudden, I had this robust investment portfolio that I didn't know the first thing to do with. And we kept it in trusts, and it kept, growing and accumulating. And it wasn't until years later, when I actually started working at JP Morgan, that I got more involved in what those actual investments were. And I think it's kind of something that I have grown and struggled with, is being passive about my own investing and taking a more active approach. And it's really only been in the past, I'd say 10 years that I've taken a more active approach, because back then it was, oh, here's your financial advisor. He's an old man in his 60s that my grandfather used, and he's going to keep managing your money just like he's been doing forever. I didn't know any better or any different. So sure. And that was kind of the first opportunity that I was exposed to the power of investments and having an investment portfolio, but didn't actively engage with it for probably another 15 years.
Well, it's so interesting to think about the concept of really generational wealth, or being able to build and create and pass on, and also really sort of the differences in values. When we think about money and values and the things that we spend our money on and the things that other people we know what they don't spend their money on, or certainly looking even at generational traumas, and this idea of squirreling away the money, right? It's certainly paid off for grandchildren and for yourself, but also I just can't help but imagine like the mindset, right, of feeling the fear or the need to squirrel it away out of just for whatever those reasons are, right? It's like it's all very fluid in terms of what feels right or how we want to do things and where we think the importance is. And kudos and bravo to him for really like seeing the gift he was able to pass on to his family. I think that is like something that we all wish for, is that
legacy was very important to him, even though we didn't really know that it was, it was a surprise. But I think one of the other things I took away from that, and I would revisit this years later when I had some clients at JP Morgan in the same instance, his wife, my grandmother, who lived another 20 years, she didn't know the first thing about finances. And she didn't even know where the checkbook was, and certainly didn't know how the bills were getting paid, and had to rely on outside advisors. And again, men who weren't, older financial advisors and accountants and whatnot, who didn't necessarily listen to her. And that was a formative moment for me too, is that I never wanted to be in the position where I didn't understand my finances and have complete control and visibility into all of them. And, I think both my grandfather and my father, so, you and I were talking about this earlier, you end up dating / marrying the people that have similar, relationships with money to how you grew up. Both my grandfather and my father were the type of people who, when the credit card bill came, they would get out a highlighter and go through every line and ask their spouses, what is this? What is this? What is this? And that was a formative memory in my childhood too, that I early on never ever wanted to be in that position where somebody was asking me what I was spending my money on. So I knew early on that I wanted to be in control of my finances so that I could spend money on what I wanted to spend money on.
Heck yes. That is a yes, yes, yes. So Elaine, talk to me a little bit about sort of your career progression before you landed at JP Morgan. What were some of the pivotal moments for you, and were you sort of what aspects, I guess, of your career or interests were you cultivating? And, were you on this bedrock of saying, okay, I don't need to be motivated by huge salaries or big negotiations? Or were you like, I'm going in here and I am negotiating and getting the salaries I want and the titles? Talk to me about this first chunk of time. How did you spend it? How were you mentally and emotionally navigating this?
Well, it's so funny. So I'd say the first year after my grandfather had passed away, my grandmother, who we just learned knew very little about finances, she wanted to continue his gifting, the annual tax-free amount you could gift. And instead of putting it in trust as previously, she mailed us all checks. So I came home from this job one day that I didn't love. I had a check for $11,000 in my mailbox, and I thought I had won the lottery. This is like 1999, 2000. And I quit the next day. With no plan, no idea. But again, it was, .com heyday here, and there were jobs aplenty. And I knew I wanted to work in technology and internet industry. And so it didn't take me very long to find a new job. But it was only because of her generosity and having that cushion that I could afford to, leave this job. I had a very fun job working for a .com company until the lights went out there. We were basically building websites. And then again, more consultative sales though. I was always doing business development, working to gain new clients for us to build them websites. And when the lights went out on that one, it was a dark time in San Francisco. 2001, 2002, the .com bubble was real. And, you could shoot a cannon down the street here. There was nobody here. The streets were empty. Nobody was commuting down to Silicon Valley back then. But so I actually had already planned this trip, but I took the internet company I'd been working for had gone public, and I had managed to get a little out while the getting was still good. So I took that and traveled around Europe for 8 months. This was unfortunately shortly after 9/11. So I didn't get to go to as many far-flung remote places as I would have liked because it wasn't super safe for an American woman traveling around back then, but still had an amazing 8 months. And when I came back and started looking for a new job, the internet jobs just weren't there, but I still had this consultative sales, background and expertise and interest. And I'd always had a love of museums. And a friend was working at the Asian Art Museum. And so they're hiring for fundraising. They called it development. And I said, what is that? They're like, oh, it's like business development. It's like, well, I do that. And I grew up running around this beautiful museum in Fort Worth where my mother is still a docent, called the Kimball Art Museum. And I've just always loved museums. So I ended up getting a job there doing development work, and turned out I was great at it. It's, again, consultative sales and being good with people, and I just loved it. And so that began an almost 10-year career in nonprofit fundraising for different cultural institutions in San Francisco. And it was really interesting because you're basically dealing with millionaires and billionaires and asking them to donate money to support these institutions. And so the amount of wealth you're surrounded by is mind-boggling, and interesting to see how different families manage their philanthropy. And I met so many amazing people who never wanted their name in lights, never wanted their name on a building, did it for the love of the organization, for the love of the city. And then I met lots of people who wanted their name everywhere for not very much money. So it was an interesting array of people, and really got to see how different people deal with massive amounts of wealth. One takeaway, I have many takeaways, but one is rich people love free shit. And two, money can't buy you happiness. Those are two things I had learned from those jobs that I will always keep with me.
What were some of the, I think it's so fascinating when we start to work with people when we're, let's say, we're like learning so much, right? It's like you're around all these people and these families, and truly, I think that when there's so much wealth involved, you really get to see what people are like, because there really is no other motivation other than whatever you deem to be your own self-interest, right? Like and your self-interest might be supporting arts, culture, social justice, whatever feels right to you, right, is sort of what you express. As you are sort of getting to understand and know yourself better, right, through this process, were there any families or themes or things where you were like, oh, like I want to be like that or approach it like this, like, or man, the way that these people are, this sort of mentality is really not for me. Like, what were some of those deeper self-reflective moments throughout this 10-year period?
Back then is when I learned that the best philanthropy comes from things you're personally passionate about. So supporting an organization just because your grandparents did that you don't really care about is probably not going to make you that happy, and it's probably not the best fit. But it's where I started thinking seriously about what do I care about, and what, if I had all the money in the world, where would I give it away and what would I do with it? And supporting women has always been top of my priority list. And in any way I ever can, whether through money or time or support, like I just love supporting other women and women's organizations. Some of the philanthropists I worked with very closely also supported things beyond the cultural arts. And so I got exposure to different organizations doing different work in gender equality and women's issues, which I just found fascinating. So that's when I learned that, follow your own passions in philanthropy is the best fit, and that trying to keep up with the Joneses via philanthropy is not always the key to happiness.
Yes. I think what's also fascinating is as we turn the corner here to your career in finance,
yes.
How fascinating that you now get to experience ultra high net worth and high net worth individuals, both from an investing standpoint and a philanthropic standpoint, and sort of the differences by which people look at money. Truly, it's emotional, because at the end of the day, you're putting your money towards something. You think it's going to create some impact in some capacity, no matter what you're doing with it, whether that's increasing the value of those assets or increasing, the cultural programming of an institution. You're expecting some sort of return on here. Tell me what it was like to start to move this direction. What were the dominoes that fell that got you into finance and that sort of set you on this track?
Well, I'll say first, one thing to add that I think comes back to time at JP Morgan too, is something I've noticed, learned, and saw in stark relief both at JP Morgan and in my fundraising nonprofit career. And I think it's societal, but there's this idea that men make the money and women give it away. Men are super comfortable with investing, women less so, but women are super comfortable with philanthropy. And at the end of the day, they're both investments, but there's just a different societal overlay to the two. And, I'll get to how I got to JP Morgan in a second, but I'll never forget this one client, this one couple that I worked with at JP Morgan, who he wanted to invest heavily in energy stocks. And she wanted to write checks to Conservation International and the National Resource Defense Council. And I looked at the two of them and I said, do you two talk? Do you understand that you are essentially canceling each other out? And she had no interest in hearing about these energy stocks he wanted to invest in oil and gas companies. And he didn't care what philanthropic checks she wrote. And I thought, you guys are at cross purposes, but it was very clear, and I saw this repeatedly, that the investing piece was his and the philanthropic piece was hers. And so that was an interesting thing I saw on my fundraising side too, is that women are very comfortable with philanthropy and giving away money and writing checks in that regard, but less so in investing. And one of my mentors is this amazing woman, Deborah Jackson, who runs a group called Plum Alley. And Plum Alley is a women's investing collective. It does SPVs to invest in women entrepreneurs. Deborah had a very successful career at Goldman Sachs, retired early, and really wanted to figure out how to get more venture money into the hands of women. And Deborah had tons of ultra high net worth women friends, and she kept asking them, she was part of Women Moving Millions, which are, philanthropists who agree to write $1 million donations to charities specifically involving women and girls. And she would ask these philanthropist women friends of hers, like, would you invest in a startup run by a woman? Oh, no, I don't do that. I don't know how to do that. I wouldn't know how to do that. I wouldn't know where to begin. So we were writing these really large checks to, nonprofits that are essentially small startups. But she noticed that they didn't feel confident or comfortable making investment decisions. And so Deborah said, well, if I did the diligence for you, would you write me the check to invest? And they said, sure. So that's kind of how Palm Alley began. But I love that story because as much as charitably supporting women's organizations is great, we also need to get money into the hands of women entrepreneurs. So
the entire ecosystem needs to be funded.
Exactly. Yeah. So my journey to JP Morgan was serendipitous, but also strategic. I had, after about 8 or 9 years in the nonprofit world, as much as I loved it, nonprofit salaries do not buy you a home in the Bay Area, unfortunately. And I really was getting to the point in my life where I wanted to start being more strategic about saving money and investing and potentially buying a home. And so I started looking around for, okay, how can I take this skill set I have of consultative sales and now this massive Rolodex I built up over the past 10 years and what could I do with that transferable skills wise? And while I was thinking about it the San Francisco was hosting the America's Cup or getting ready to host the America's Cup, which is a sailboat race. And I love big sporting events. I don't know the first thing about sailing, but I love big sporting events and I love San Francisco and I love what sporting events can do to showcase cities like San Francisco. And I read they were raising private money. I was like, I do that. So I called up the guy who was managing the efforts to raise civic dollars and had the most fun job. For 3 years, we ran around town and twisted arms and got local civic leaders and philanthropists to give us $20 million for the world's third richest and sailboat race.
Wow, how wild, Elaine. How fun and wild. Like, what a time.
It was so much fun. And I took that job strategically because I knew it would introduce me to a bunch of different people and a bunch of different industries. And sure enough, I met people in all kinds of different industries. I thought about political fundraising. I thought about sports marketing. And because of the nature of the type of person who the America's Cup attracts, super ultra high net worth individuals, I met a ton of people in private wealth management and became good friends with a woman who also mentored to me, this woman named Tracy Warson. And Tracy ran the private bank for Citibank here in Northern California and then went on to run it for the entire company. Now successfully retired, but she said to me, you would be great at private wealth management. And I was like, what is that? Don't you need an MBA and 10 years of finance experience? She said, no, you need to be good talking to wealthy people and know a lot of them. And I was like, well, that's what I've been doing for the past 10 years. So I went on an informational interview campaign to talk to anybody and everybody who would talk to me about, who does it the best, where to get the best training. And so many people were so generous with their time. And I ended up getting a job at JP Morgan, which was the best education on finance you could ever imagine. I had to take my Series 7 in 63. And I think if somebody had told me in advance what those were, I might never have taken that job. I don't know if you've had to study as an adult. Studying as an adult is a whole different ballgame. You're like, wait, what do you mean I can't have a glass of wine right now? What do you mean I can't watch TV? I have to study? So, of course, I get back to the type A student. I overstudied and everyone gave me shit at work for, getting a 95 on the Series 7. You're never supposed to get more than 1 or 2 points over passing because it means you studied too much. But I was so paranoid. Anyway, it was a fantastic education. I had a great time there, worked with some amazing people, learned from some amazing people, had some fantastic clients. And it was actually 2 of my clients there were very early in crypto, which is how I got into crypto, which is what I've been doing for the past eight years now. And this is back in 2013, 14-ish. And JP Morgan was trying to fire them as clients simply because of their crypto holdings. They wouldn't count it towards mortgage. They wouldn't count it towards minimums for other investments. And as I was trying to defend them as clients and learning as much as I possibly could about crypto, I fell down the proverbial rabbit hole and decided I really wanted to work in the industry. I have a little bit of a libertarian streak in me. And one of my primary beliefs is that nobody should be able to tell me what I can and can't do with my money. And yet you look around at the traditional financial system and people are constantly telling you what you can and can't do with your money and charging you fees on this and fees on that. And even Venmo and PayPal can withhold transfers if they don't like something you're doing. And so that aspect of crypto really appealed to me. And I'll never forget asking my friend one of the first questions I had, said, well, who regulates it? He said, no one. I said, sign me up. I'm in.
It's so interesting. And so for you, closing those early knowledge gaps, I think that that is when it comes to just education on our own personal values, our money, obviously the Series 7 and, these financial exams you took really got you up to snuff on everything with investing and sort of
about portfolio construction and the importance of diversification and alternative investment, alternative asset classes. And it was really interesting to see, especially at the JP Morgan client level, how wealthy people made more money and the opportunities that were available to them because of their balance sheet. So in JP Morgan parlance, balance sheet is a nice way to say how rich you are. So their balance sheets allowed them access to investments that your everyday investor doesn't have access to. Don't get me started on accredited investor roles. It drives me nuts. But it was an eye-opening education around the importance of diversification and the importance of alternative asset classes that have the outsized asymmetric upside potential that doesn't exist in your typical stock and bond, ETF portfolio. So
it's so fascinating. I rarely double click on sort of the mechanics of things, but I think it's really valuable and important to do so in this particular area, mostly because I think that how you close the information gap on starting to both emotionally take a risk on alternative assets, which I think is difficult to do, similar to how you said about, the woman handles the philanthropy, is too afraid to do the investing. You're talking about pushing it to another degree here. So when you were starting to learn about cryptocurrency and sort of this asymmetric upside, can you double click onto how those pieces sort of fell into play, and what was it that kind of made sense to you, that light bulbs went off and you said, this is the direction that not only is going to help provide generational wealth for you and sort of, but also this is an untapped opportunity for women, right? And sort of their opportunity to also take advantage of this upside. Give it to me straight.
Yep. Well, it originally stemmed from my competitive nature, and these two clients of mine, I was like, if they can figure it out, I can figure this out too. They were great people, but I was like, you're smarter than I am. I can figure this out too. And it was early days enough and early stage enough that it was, the thing that attracted me to it was that it was open to anyone. Anybody with the intellectual curiosity to dive into it could figure it out, and anybody could invest in it. Now, that's not completely fair. Back then, especially, it was not user-friendly. It's still not that user-friendly, which is one of the challenges that I am, personally working on tackling right now. But technically, it was open to anybody. And in that sense, it was a democratized alternative asset that, places like the successful VC firms like Sequoia or Andreessen, I can't get into those rounds, but I could buy Bitcoin. And so much about Bitcoin spoke to me that the thing that I read that really clicked for me, obviously the white paper is actually not as filled with technical jargon as you might expect. And having lived in, San Francisco, around Silicon Valley and technology for so long, the aspect of money as code really did make sense. And the piece that really clicked for me was the finite supply. There are only 21 million Bitcoin will ever be mined, and it can't be changed, immutable. And you think about inflation and the inflationary environment we've been going through now, and how many US dollars are there? Who knows? We just keep printing more. There's some crazy statistics about we've printed more dollars in the past 5 years than we have in our entire history. So I really like the inflation resistant component of Bitcoin, and that spoke to me. But it wasn't until I read a book called The Little Bitcoin Book that was this tiny. It was written by a group of people over a long weekend. And it is the best explanation about Bitcoin and why it's important without any technical jargon. And that's the book I give to everybody and anybody who's first getting started in this space, because they read it in a couple hours and it usually clicks, like why this is important. As I got more and more interested in the space, I also saw that it was completely dominated by men. There were very few women in crypto in the early days. Part of it is because it is essentially, crypto is at the center of a Venn diagram of things that are not very female friendly. It's technology, it's finance, it's cryptography, it's cyberpunks, it's dudes in hoodies. Like those are not super welcoming to women. I remember going to some early meetups in San Francisco and I was the only woman, definitely the oldest person in the room, the only one not wearing a hoodie. But my favorite part about the industry is that there actually are now plenty of women who work in the space. But because there are still so few of us, we all really look out for each other and really help each other and lift each other up. And that's been one of the best parts about working in the space is that I've made some amazing lifelong female friends.
It's incredible.
But I also saw so many men make so much money, like life-changing money, like life-changing wealth. And I saw them go out and buy Lamborghinis, go out and buy a super yacht. And those are things women just don't really do. When women have life-changing amounts of money, like good things happen. We invest in each other. We invest in our families. We invest in our communities. And I'm not saying men don't do that too, but we're not going out and buying Lambos. And this trope of the crypto bro and the Lambo is really something that I want to change because I want women to participate in this asset class because it has this life-changing wealth potential. Obviously, it's risky. Obviously, it's super volatile. And that's what I have dedicated my current career to trying to educate women around.
I love that. That's so incredible. And so, Elaine, as you were starting to make your way into cryptocurrency, can you talk to me about how your sort of pie shifted over the last 10 years, right? So did it start off as 0.05% of everything? And then, explain to us a little bit about how your portfolio of where you invest your money in anything, right? It could be art or whatever it is, and how that's really shifted now that your education has really changed and expanded and you have this larger purview.
I was thinking about this earlier. I have a very high risk tolerance when it comes to investing. Specifically because I believe in myself and my ability to always make money and provide for myself. So I don't worry too much about losing an investment here or there or taking a bigger risk because I can always make money if I need to. So having said that, I did start small in crypto, and these clients of mine who were also friends, they made me buy Bitcoin back in 2013. I of course wish I had bought more. But I didn't sell it when it had quadrupled. Maybe it had gone from $300 to $1,200. I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. But I had thought of it as a long-term hold. I especially like to make an investment plan and then as best I can, try to stick to it. So I told myself, okay, I'm taking a flyer on crypto and I'm going to hold this for 10 years. If it all goes to zero, my life will not be dramatically changed. If it does what I think it could, my life could be dramatically changed. And this is a risk I'm willing to take. We talk about sizing a lot, especially when it comes to alternative assets in general, but then also especially crypto. And a great rule of thumb is, 1 to 5% of your investable portfolio, you should bucket or think about bucketing into alternative investments. And, the only alternative that's not true. I have a handful of angel investments, but smaller checks. The majority of my alternative investments are in crypto. And it started out just with some Bitcoin. And then, there's so many I missed out on. I wish I had. This is another truth I learned is that it takes money to make money. And there are a couple opportunities that I had to make investments where I just didn't have any cash on hand. I didn't have any free capital. And I kicked myself that I did not participate in the Ethereum ICO. It also was super risky and technologically, complicated to understand. And I didn't fully. They eventually bought some Ethereum, and these still are the top two largest market cap cryptos, and the two that I recommend most people start with. You can now get access to them in traditional brokerage. Well, soon you'll have an Ethereum ETF, but there's Bitcoin ETFs you can access in your brokerage account. But that was kind of how it started. And then my first job in crypto was working for a startup called Bitwise. Bitwise now has some of the ETFs, but Bitwise's initial product was a diversified basket of crypto. And so that's when I started branching out and trying to build a more diverse portfolio, taking risks on some of the, as we call them in the industry, shitcoin. also known as altcoins. So placing smaller bets on much smaller bets. Again, considering some of it Vegas money, where if it goes to zero, my life will not be changed and I won't be sad. I won't miss it. So over the years, it has grown. And as I say, I am irresponsibly long crypto, not only because it is my career, but because it is, I'd say, probably 30% of my total portfolio at this point. But that's risk I'm comfortable with because I work in this industry and I really do believe in it. And have I lost money over the years? Oh my God, yes. I mean, I have multiple crypto investments that have gone to zero. But again, it was never money that I was going to miss. I had already written it off when I made the initial investment, but it's been fun and I have learned something every single time. And that's one of my favorite things about working in this industry is that it's just, it's not for the faint of heart, but it is fascinating. And there's always something new to learn, always some new technology coming out, always some new project coming out. And I think, I'm on this mission to teach women, especially, to get up the curve and to become educated on this, because I really do think it has the potential to create wealth. And I don't want women to miss out on that because, it goes back to kind of the things I witnessed in the .com 1.0 and just being in Silicon Valley for so long is that there are these closed networks that women don't necessarily have access to. I'm not playing basketball with Mark Zuckerberg's college roommate, so I'm not getting in on that next deal. But crypto is open to anyone and everyone. So it is completely democratized. You don't have to be in the same kiteboarding team as Gary Tan to be able to get in on crypto. And that's why I want women to understand enough to be able to start investing in it. I remember asking the Bitwise, working at Bitwise was a fantastic experience. And I love that team. And I think I was employee number 12 or 13, one of the only two women. The only person over 40, which was very entertaining. Yeah, the second week I was there, one of the founders said to me, "Hey, Elaine, do you mean for the font on your screen to be that big? Because you can change it." And I said, "Just you wait." And yes, I do know, but thank you. But I remember asking the two young co-founders, they were guys in their late 20s, "What are you going to do if Bitwise becomes massively successful and you have a huge exit?" Without missing a beat, they both said, "Oh, we're going to invest in our buddies' companies." So there's just this cycle, and those buddies don't look like you and me. There's just this cycle of especially in Silicon Valley, where the same people keep getting investment, and it just is a self-perpetuating cycle. And crypto, to me, at least for me personally, was an opportunity to break that to some extent, where this could be a wealth creation event that will then allow me, which is my goals for the future, is to invest in other women. And I already do a little bit of angel investing, but as my balance sheet grows, I want to do more, and I really want to invest in women. It drives me insane that the statistic is still only 2% of women get venture capital. That's like saying women only have 2% of good ideas. That's outrageous to me. And so that's one of the things I want to change. But we need women to have massive capital liquidity events. We need more than just Sarah Blakely and Whitney Wolf Herd. And, there are plenty more, but there's not nearly as many as the men who have massive exits that turn around and then invest in the next generation of entrepreneurs, which tend to look like them.
That's right. What I think is also fascinating is moving to your focus now with Eve Wealth and thinking about not just what you're building and putting out to the world, but also your own experience. Now you've gone from fundraising and working with these cultural institutions, private wealth management, and really seeing the holistic pie to hopping onto the new, wild, wild west frontier, which you had done before in technology some years before. So here you are again, back on the horse and starting to be on the frontier of education and sort of building these other businesses. And now you find yourself in this really delicious position of building your own startup. And so you are not only now looking to educate and evangelize and help other women become rich, but you're also in this fundraising process yourself. It really feels, Elaine, like in the next 10 years, I don't know what you would not have done when it comes to engaging with money and sort of our financial ecosystems. It's so powerful. So let's dive a little bit into Eve Wealth. Obviously, you've got a big mission and vision ahead of you. Please share with the listeners. What are you building?
This all started during COVID and quarantine. And during quarantine, I was hosting, some girlfriends asked me if I would do a Zoom session on what the heck is crypto. And I said, sure. Instead of baking bread or knitting, we had Crypto 101 Zoom sessions. And I must have done like 15 or 20 of these. And girlfriends told girlfriends, told friends, told friends. And I logged on one day and there were 200 women, none of whom I knew, on this Zoom, eager to learn about crypto, but didn't know where to start. And so Eve Wealth really is the realization of my dream to empower more women to invest in digital assets. So much of crypto today is very DIY and just, not a very simple user experience and requires a lot of effort. We want to abstract away all of that effort to make it very simple, safe, and secure for anybody, but especially women, to invest in digital assets. And when we thought about why aren't more women investing in crypto, it basically boils down to education and community. Women want to understand as much as they possibly can about an investment before making an investment decision. And while, yes, there's a lot of information out there about crypto, there's a lot of junk out there too. And there's no one-stop, easy to access resource. So Eve Wealth will be a trusted resource with tons of education available in different formats, webinars, forums, AMAs, libraries, etc. And the other piece, women especially, and I count myself among this too, we like doing things together. It's a lot more fun to invest, to learn about investing and invest with a group of women than it is to do it on your own. You don't want to feel like you're by yourself on an island trying to figure out something as complicated as crypto. That's just not fun, and it's overwhelming. It can be overwhelming. So we're providing a really robust community component to Eve Wealth as well. But at the end of the day, it will be a very simple investing platform where you are asked a few questions about your personal risk tolerance, your time horizon, your other investable assets. And then we recommend a model portfolio of digital assets based on your answers. And we're going to start with 5 model portfolios from least risky to most risky, with the caveat that it is all risky. We're going to educate everybody about sizing and time horizon, how long you might consider holding these investments, how to weather the volatility. And digital assets are just the first piece of what we're going to offer. We really want Eve to become an alternative investment platform, because women have also historically been left out of alternative investment asset classes. And as more asset classes become tokenized, thanks to blockchain technology, we'll be able to have smaller entry points and democratized versions of things like a private equity fund or a real estate fund. As those become tokenized, you can have a piece of this for $500 and you don't necessarily need to be an accredited investor. So really kind of democratizing additional asset classes after crypto.
That's so amazing. And so tell me a little bit about what has fundraising been like? What have you been noticing, right? Now that you've been engaging with people in fundraising your whole life now, right? It's like from all these different angles. What has it been like to now put yourself in the seat as a female founder who is fundraising for a startup? You mentioned earlier about the 2% of, fundraising capital going towards women. You would fall into that bucket. What has it been like? And how do you sort of weather the storms, if you will, of being on all these different angles of seeing it and now living through it yourself from this capacity?
It's been fascinating. I think we're in a unique position where the majority of crypto native venture capitalists are all men and don't really understand the potential impact of women coming into this space could have on the rest of their portfolio companies and on the rest of the ecosystem. So we haven't talked about this yet, but I'm sure you've talked about it on your podcast with others. The great wealth transfer that we all know is coming as boomers pass away and pass on massive amounts of wealth to the next generations. Women are going to be a huge component of that. And women are going to control $30 trillion in investable assets by the year 2030. So if we want the crypto industry and all these companies that all these VCs have invested in to be as successful as possible, we have to figure out how to get 50% of the population to understand what they are and how to use them. And that's what Eve is going to do. Despite that, the male crypto VCs don't really see where we fit into their portfolio. And in many cases, it completely makes sense. They're investing in really, really deep tech, ZK sync rollups, all kinds of crazy technological jargon I won't bore you with now. On the flip side, there are lots of women-based VCs who are still uncomfortable with crypto and still nervous about crypto in general. So we haven't fit in either of those buckets, really. And where we've had the most success with fundraising have been women angel investors who have made money in crypto themselves and want that for other women. Women in crypto who are desperate for a place to send their non-crypto friends. The number of women who work in the space and say, God, if I send one more friend to XYZ exchange where they have to figure it out themselves and they keep asking me 5 million questions, I'm going to scream. I would like a trusted resource where I can send all of my non-crypto friends. And they see that that is what Eve will be. And then crypto native protocols run by women or with women leadership see the benefit of onboarding 50% of the population to the ecosystem, who will then eventually one day use their protocol for whether it's buying an NFT or trading on a DeFi platform or staking to earn yield. They see the benefit of more people in the ecosystem benefiting their protocol one day. So it has been interesting and challenging, but as you know, I am shameless and I never take anything personally, and I will continue to follow up with you until you really tell me no or block my number.
Yes. Determination. Grit. I love it. So Elaine, looking at the future, or let's say rather putting ourselves in the future and looking into the past, and obviously you're going to live many lifetimes between now and let's say 100, 105. I have no doubt that in about 30 years, you and I will be talking about building some businesses out in space.
Yes.
And, who knows what else we'll be doing. Certainly having a lot of fun and getting rich together.
Absolutely.
But as we are looking at your beautiful legacy of a life, if you were to put yourself in the seat of a beautiful 105-year-old empowered, legacy-filled woman looking back on her life, what would that look like? What does it feel like? What is the impact that you now are looking to make into the world?
Oh, it's such a great question. I think, two inspirational women, Sarah Blakely, founder of Spanx, she takes her group of best girlfriends on a surprise trip every year for her birthday and spares no expense. And it's just, I've always wanted to do that. I think that's such a great idea. And a lot of her friends are childhood friends who are teachers or educators. And this is a, super, super generous thing she does. I've always thought that was super fun. And then I look at someone like Reese Witherspoon and Hello Sunshine, and they put on an amazing event every year where they bring together powerful women and women companies they've invested in. So fast forwarding, I would imagine having a fabulous women's gathering filled with women who have invested in each other and helped each other be successful and are continuing to help each other be successful. It's one of my favorite things about women. They just want to help each other. And the more resources that I can help get to other women to then have exits of their own, to then invest in the next generation of women. I don't have children and it was never a driving force in my life, but I could totally imagine having generation of founders, women founders who have then invested in other women founders and bringing them all together for my 105th birthday party would be fabulous.
Yes, how fabulous. I'm just imagining you now in something very royal. I could see Queen Asher and her dynastic, room.
I have a crypto avatar, as many of us in crypto do, and my crypto avatar is Starfire Lioness.
Ooh, fabulous. Some of my favorite closing questions, Elaine, one of them is really around fun and joy. Money, I think, is a fantastic tool and vehicle, but ultimately it is just so fun to exercise it and flex it. What are some of your favorite ways to spend your capital?
Travel. That's my number one thing to spend money on is travel and experiences, seeing new places, doing new things. I'm going to Spain in September for a big trip, seeing some places I haven't seen before. I just love travel. That's how I spend the majority of my disposable income. That
fabulous.
Eating out as well. Fine dining is one of my favorite things to do. I've planned whole trips around being able to get into a certain Michelin-starred restaurant. So another perk of money.
Gosh, I think we need a whole other episode on Michelin-star restaurants and fine dining. Getting rich together over fine dining. I love that. My last question, Elaine, is, obviously you are up to big stuff and you are out here changing the world. And my love, you have been your whole life. You've really been out there advocating for people to exercise their capital to their values and really in that consultative sales model, helping people align, where they're going to spend their capital and invest their capital. What do you need? If you were to put something out into the world, what are you calling in? What could a consultative sales reversal look like, right? Like, what is it that you are needing? What is it you are wanting? How can this gorgeous audience that we have support you? You're on the pedestal, my love. What do you need?
I love the give get. It's one of my favorite things to do with groups of women. Another woman investor that I'm very good friends with, she says the thing all the time that when women get together, they're not very good about asking for what they need or what they want, but men do it all the time. Like when men get to business dinners, it's like, this is what I need from you. Can you make that connection, please? And they don't think twice about it, whereas women never really do it. So her husband insists that we all do it when we get together. It's like, before you all get gabbing about whatever it is you're talking about, I want you all to go around the room and say one give and one get. So I love doing that. So my ask to this amazing community is please keep your eyes peeled for news about evewealth.com. And I would love everybody to check it out, sign up, tell your friends, and just take the first step. Spend an hour reading something about crypto. And then my best piece of advice is always dip a toe in, put $100 in, invest $100, see how it makes you feel, watch it over a few weeks, few months, dollar cost average in. And tell your friends, because I think one of the unique powers women have is the power of our networks and how much we do want to help each other. And the ability of women to network to make something grow is something we are very much relying on at Eve Wealth. But I actually feel very confident will happen.
Elaine Asher, you are an incredible woman. I am so grateful to have you in my vortex, to learn from you, to build with you. You have shared with us so many incredible stories here today on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This is an absolute treat. You're a fantastic interviewer and asked some really great questions and made me feel very comfortable and sharing probably too much, but I really appreciate the opportunity. It was super fun.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Getting Rich Together. Please take a minute to subscribe. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you could share it with a friend who is ready to elevate their financial future. Until next time, let's keep getting rich together.